Hey guys, this is the second time I'm recording this one, but this one is going to be a what if just for me because I want to put my own twist on this. But uh, shout out to Shota Aizawa, the YouTuber. He did a version of this, and I liked his version, but I want to make my own version. And my version is going to be a female one instead of his male one. And it's what if Deku had a Black Panther quirk. And like he said in his video, I'm not going to give him the powers of Black Panther from Wakanda. I'm giving him a Black Panther or a form of a Black Panther, the abilities of a Black Panther, and shadow manipulation like he does. But I'm going to make his shadow manipulation just a tiny bit stronger. So, we start off with a child just coming out of the quirk doctor, and his parents are pulling him along to the car, and he's crying like, "Why are you hurting me? This hurts. Why are you pulling me so hard?" And they're like, "Shut up, brat!" And 30-ish minutes later, they get to this tree line and they kick him out of the car, and he just starts crying on the edge of the forest. And, or no, I'm thinking of Shota Aizawa's version. It's a she in this one. And she's just crying there. And this man who's tall, he's not in his hero costume, but he does have one. He's tall, he's muscular, and he hears this crying on the side of the road. And he backs his car up to the side of the road and parks, gets out of his car, and he walks to where the crying is. And he sees this little girl on the side of the road, and he picks her up saying, "Why are you out here so late?" And she goes, "My parents left me." And he goes, "Okay, I'm going to take care of you for a few days to see what we can do with you." And she goes, "Thank you." And he takes her to the um, a lodge that he works at for rescuing people. And when he gets out, he yells, "Mandalay, Ragdoll, Pixie Bob, get out here." And they run out and go, "What is it, Tiger?" And he says that, "I found a little kid on the side of the road coming this direction, and she's just crying. And apparently her parents left her there." And Pixie Bob gets pissed off. Ragdoll gets mad. And Mandalay is sad for this little girl. And they say, "We could raise her here." And he goes, um, "What?" And they go, "We'll raise her here." All three of them at the same time. Because without without Mandalay, Pixie Bob, or Ragdoll knowing each other or his desires, they all desired a child of their own. And they're going to treat this child like their own kid. Because their hero work is too important for them to be in a relationship. So they keep going upon their daily duties of rescuing people. But when they get home, they say hi to the little girl, and finally the little girl opens up and says her name after a good week of them eating together, her her being shown where the bathrooms are to get washed up and changed. And Mandalay, Ragdoll, and Tiger all are pissed off at this set of parents who just used her for her quirk. And she will have a brother in this one, and he will have flame manipulation because it's Inko Midoriya and Hizashi Midoriya. Duh. And Tiger one day, who wasn't there when she said her name, walks in and says, "Can you tell me your name today?" And she goes, "Yeah, it's Izumi." And he goes, "Okay, Izumi. Has everybody else known what you're..." Ooh, I should watch that one. "Does everybody else know what your name is?" And she goes, "Yeah, you weren't here when I told them." And he goes, "Okay, it makes sense." And finally, she is opened up to the rest of the crew, and it's now 6 years later. She's 10, and they hear of a tragedy, a few heroes dying, and that the villain is called the hero killer Stain. And Izumi at this point has been calling Mandalay mom, Ragdoll and Pixie Bob aunt, because Mandalay has been more attached to Izumi than everybody else. Izumi has dark bluish purple hair, and she has dark blue, like almost black kind of ears. It's dark blue, and a dark blue tail, which is almost black. And at this time, she's finally manifesting her transformation and her manipulation. And one day, while she's just walking in the forest, talking to Ragdoll and saying her what's on her mind, Ragdoll feels her start moving quicker, and she looks over and sees Izumi's gone. Because all of a sudden, Izumi just finished her sentence and stopped talking. And she knew Izumi was still there, but she just didn't know where she was. Because Ragdoll can sense when people are around her and sense exactly where they are. But she didn't know that she could sense over a different plane of existence. Shadows are a different plane of existence. Duh. And she looks over and doesn't see Izumi, and Izumi's still talking, thinking that Ragdoll's still listening, and she looks over and sees Ragdoll is in the black and white version of Ragdoll, and she starts yelling Ragdoll what's happening, and Ragdoll, not hearing her, runs back to the cabin and says, Mandalay, I need your help now. And Mandalay runs out, and Ragdoll takes her to the exact spot Izumi is sitting there, and Izumi's there, and she says, I need you to connect to Izumi and tell her that everything's okay. It's her quirk. And Mandalay's like, what? What? And Ragdoll says, I think her quirk has has a manipulation of some sort, because she's standing right there and she points to a spot, and Izumi sees that Ragdoll knows she's there. And Mandalay's, okay. And she starts connecting to everybody and says, okay, Izumi, I know you can hear me. Calm down and focus on us. 10-ish minutes later, after Mandalay starts focusing into that general area, so Ragdoll can hear what Mandalay's saying, and Izumi can also hear. Izumi calms down and focuses and starts manipulating the shadows again, and she pops out of the shadows. She gets thrown out of the shadows like somebody, like Mirio is thrown out of the ground when he stops being permeable. So Ragdoll hugs her, saying, I'm glad you're okay, and we now know what your entire quirk does. And she goes, yeah, I can transform into a panther, and I can uh, manipulate shadows. And I go, yeah. Skip, Koda's 6, maybe 7. Roughly the same age as Eri. So we skip. Yeah, we skip 10. No, not 10. Yeah, 10 years. And she's had her hero license for a little bit. She's now a full-fledged hero. She's known as Black Panther, and yes, I'm making her known as Black Panther. And one day, Aizawa walks into the forest with a group of children and says, next year I would like you to come and teach my kids how to survive. And she goes, okay, I'll do that. And Mandalay hears this and is like, yes, she's finally leaving home. And Pixie Bob and Ragdoll are like, oh, she's leaving home. And Mandalay tells them why it's good, because she's never left the forest. So we skip a year. She's 21 years old. And she walks into UA, and Nezu greets her, and she says hi back to Nezu, and the dorms are already set up. And Nezu takes her to the teacher's dorms and says that you're Cat Castle, and she goes, oh, you actually got me a cat castle? And he goes, yeah. who requested it, and she goes, I didn't think you'd actually do it. And she starts thanking him constantly and asking, does he have any candied bacon? Yeah. And if there's anything to make candied bacon, and he goes, not yet. I will get right on to that, and hopefully you can settle in quickly. And she goes, thank you. And she runs to her room, and she jumps onto a cat castle and lays down and basically passes out. And a month later, it's now the entrance exams, and she's just sitting in the monitoring room. And so Nezu says, I shall release the 0-pointer. And she goes, don't do it for that city. And he goes, why? And she goes, that building is about to crumble, and it's going to crush the people under it, so don't do it yet for that city. And she says, okay, now you can. And he goes, why? And she goes, nobody's around the buildings that are about to crumble, so everybody's fine. And he goes, okay. And he releases it for that one, so no one is under the rubble. No one needs to be saved from the 0-pointer, except so they all run away. Except for Bakugo. He's still the arrogant child that he is. So, we now move on to the, yeah. So we move on to the first day, and she walks in, and she just sits down at the teacher's desk, and she starts doing a contest with Aizawa. Aizawa is currently sitting or laying in a caterpillar mode at the front door, and she's just sitting at the desk staring at him like, so who's going to be noticed first? And 10 minutes in, and Aizawa's like, screw this. So he stands up and says, okay, all you problem children. Took you 10 minutes to finally notice someone. And they turn around and go, what? And he goes, oh, God damn it. And he goes up to the podium, and he's just having a speech about how it took them 10 minutes and a person to tell them to shut up, and that's not acceptable. And Izumi's just still sitting at the desk with her hands crossed, and she's just messing with her hands and just sitting there. And finally Bakugo goes, who's that extra at your desk? And he goes, oh, her? She's a teacher at UA, so I suggest you treat her with a little bit of respect, if any. And she's my favorite person at this goddamn school. And she goes, oh, thank you. And he goes, just shut up already. And she goes, I like you too. And she just goes back to playing with her fingers and nails. And he goes, everybody outside. She'll demonstrate the exercises, and I'll give you guys scores. And so she disappears, and everybody's like, wait, what the hell? And she appears in the back and says, I'll be making sure that no one is being a pervert. And she stares at this grape-haired looking guy who has this weird vibe and is staring at her funny. And she goes, and I'll make sure none of you are late. And she just grins, and she shows her fangs, and she's like, this is gonna be fun. And she starts poking her fangs with her tongue, like some vampires do when they're fidgeting. Yes, some vampires do that to show intimidation and their craziness, and when they're fidgeting. So they get out, and Mineta is expelled immediately. She walks out and says, Mineta is expelled. And Aizawa goes, why? Pervert. Oh, understandable. And they all look at her and go, you can't do that. This is the first day. And she goes, we are the teachers of this class, and points at Aizawa and her and says, we make the rules. So we can do whatever the hell we want in our class. And he goes, yeah. Tomorrow she's going to be teaching you hero versus villain stuff, and I'm going to be training you. And they go, oh, okay. And she goes, I don't really like our guest that's coming tomorrow. Can you please just go away? And Aizawa goes, I understand how you feel, but you can keep your opinions to yourself until tomorrow, when you can voice them in front of him. And she goes, yeah, because you don't give a crap about my opinions. And he goes, nope, not a single crap. And she goes, makes sense. So she grabs a ball from Aizawa and says, I'll demonstrate the tests now. So she demonstrates the ball throw, the uh, run, the long jump, the pull-ups, the sit-ups, the push-ups, the planks, all the exercises that you do for a normal school and UA. And they look at her because she's not even winded from doing 50 sit-ups, 50 push-ups, 50 pull-ups. She did a set of all of them. And she's not even winded. And Ida saw her time and was like, I'm not even that fast. And Aizawa says, okay, Bakugo Katsuki, you got the highest score at the exams. Follow her lead and do what she just did. And so everybody does, and they get cannon. Izuku's not in there. Well, Izuku is in there. Izuku Midoriya is in there. He has a panther quirk too, but he has pyrokinesis, and he can breathe fire to create it. And it's a green fire. He has green hair, green ears, and green tail. And Izumi sees this and goes, so, the asshole and the bitch both have had another kid. Makes sense. And so she just puts her feelings aside and continues with class. The very next day, she walks in and says, okay, all you problem children, it's time for some hero versus villain training. And she goes, 3, 2, 1. Oh, I am here. And a door slams open and she goes, yes, and we don't care, so go away. And he goes, well, hello to you too. Izumi. Now please leave. And he goes, I'm sorry, I've been tasked to teach them hero versus villain training. And she goes, I have too. And so please leave. And he goes, I'm sorry? I'm a teacher here. And she goes, I know. I don't like you. And they just see this teacher, this 21-year-old girl, talking back to All Might. And they're like, holy crap, who is this? Because they don't see her in her hero gear. They see her in casual clothes. When she's in her hero costume, she has a muzzle. She has a collar. And this collar, whenever she transforms into human form, she has her hero costume in it. So it shrinks into the collar, and the collar grows into the hero costume. So she currently just has the collar on, and only one person has noticed the collar and is like, oh, so that's her. So finally, one of the students who doesn't know who she is raises their hand and says, who are you to talk to the number one hero like that? And she goes, I'm the number 10 hero, okay? I'm Black Panther, and I have been doing hero work for the last 3 years, and I've already become the number 10 hero. So, give me a little respect, and this numbskull of a hero is not worthy of the title hero, because all he goes for is the symbol of peace, and doesn't actually want to save people, but show that heroes are here to save people. And he goes, there's got to be a symbol of peace. It doesn't even need to be me. It's just got to be somebody. So I took up the mantle because nobody else was going to. And she goes, I don't care. You still don't save people like you promise you do. And she starts yelling about how he's not a true hero. And he goes, okay. Let's talk about this later. We need to teach them. And she goes, I know, and you're not there to teach them. You're there to spectate. I'll teach them my way, and then tomorrow you'll teach them your way, and if they like my way better, then we'll go with my way. If they like your way better, they'll go with your way. And so they get out to the training field and the training field, and she goes, okay, you got to do 1 rep. And they go, what is 1 rep? And she demonstrates 1 rep, and she goes, you got to do 1 of those, and then we'll go to the heroes versus villains. And the team that wins the heroes versus villains, and this is a quirkless heroes versus villains, so you can't use the powers of your quirk. Whoever wins, because it's going to be a fair fight, gets a prize. And they all look at her and go, oh God, what is it? And she goes, oh, don't worry, this is a good prize, you will like it. So they do 1 repetition, and they go to the heroes versus villains, and they fight without their quirks, and she goes, okay, tomorrow will be quirk training with this numbskull, but the teams that won were Bakugo Katsuki, Uraraka Ochako, Momo Yaoyorozu, Shoto Todoroki, Mina Kirishima, Mina Ashido, Kirishima, I forget his last name. And those are the teams that won. The teams that fail have to do 1 more rep. And so they do that 1 more rep, and she says, okay, everybody who won, drop by the teacher's lounge at lunch. And she goes, which is in an hour. So you guys can train and do whatever the hell you want till lunch. Then you're dismissed till after lunch. And then whoever won, come to my lounge, to my dorm room at the teacher's dorms, and I'll give you your prize. So an hour later, they get to the dorm, and the teams that won just stand there, and the teams that lost just stand there waiting to see what the prize is. And she opens the door to her room, and it has a cat castle, and they're like, so she embraces the cat. Got it. And she goes, okay, the teams that won were them. She hands them pieces of candy bacon. Then another team, which she hands those people candied bacon. Then the last team, she hands the candied bacon. And she gave all the teams that won candied bacon. And she says that when you win, you get some candied bacon. And they take a bite of it. And all of them just go, so good. And she goes, I know, right? And she goes, when you win, you get a bag of candied bacon. And she shows a full bag. If you win, you get a bag of candied bacon. And if you lose, you get 1 rep. So the people who lose have more training, and the people who win have incentive to train more. And they see this and go, okay. And so we skip to the next day, and All Might takes over the heroes versus villains. He has the normal training, which is okay, everybody get out there in their hero costume. You work on your quirks today. And she's just spectating and just standing in the back. Not even saying anything, just sitting there and waiting. And he goes, okay, hero teams. And he lists the hero teams. Villain teams. He lists the villain teams. And he says, okay, first round. And they just go on and fight like normal. And they don't put very much effort into it because there's no incentive to put much effort into this. And at the end of the day, or at the end of this training, she walks up to the class and says, okay, before you go off to lunch, because lunch is in 5 minutes, I have a question for you. And they go, all look at her, and they go, what is it? And she goes, whose training did you like more? Mine, which makes you want to work out and work, or his, who just makes you work? And they point at her and they go, yours. And she goes, thank you. I feel honored. And he goes, okay, I'll be spectating the entire time. And she goes, no, you can go sleep with Aizawa. And he goes, where is Aizawa anyway? And he just gets up from his caterpillar mode in the back of the class going, I'm right here. And she goes, yeah, you can go back to sleep back there. And he goes, at least somebody knows I'm here. And he goes back to sleep, and All Might goes, damn it. She goes, the only time I'll need you is when someone loses control of their quirk. That's the only time I'll need you, because the only reason I have the only reason why I'm the 10th hero is because I'm very scary when I'm in costume, and when I use my quirk, I have a chance of killing people. I've accidentally killed someone before, and Aizawa goes, I have too, and then goes back to sleep. And they all look back and go, oh, what? And she goes, yeah, I was a villain, if I remember. Yeah, I was a villain. No, I don't even need to remember correctly. It was a villain. And they all look at her going, what? And she goes, yeah. And then she gives the 13 speech early, so 13, who gets a call up from Izumi after, says, sorry, I kind of took your speech because I had to explain to them how I accidentally killed a villain. And she goes, oh, no worries, I will be open for the USJ still. And she goes, good. So they go early to the USJ, a month early, so it's the end of the week, and she's like, okay, surprise visit to the USJ. And they're all cheering, yes! Universal Studios Japan. And she goes, you're funny. And they all look at her because she's laughing like a maniac. And they're like, oh, what? And she goes, no, unforeseen simulation joint. Universal Studios Japan. You're funny. This is a hero school, not a normal school. And they all go, oh. And she goes, oh, don't worry. The person who does the best will get a bag of candy bacon. And all of them are like, okay. And so they get on. So they go to the USJ, and Bakugo is getting better with his attitude because she says that Bakugo Katsuki does not get any candied bacon. And he's tasted it already until he fixes his attitude. And he's been fixing his attitude slowly but surely. And she's been, okay, you get a portion of the bag. And she's been slowly giving him more incentive to fix his attitude with candied bacon. So it's now the actual USJ, and they're like, we already went to the USJ, so let's just do more Heroes versus Villains training. So Shigaraki shows up at the USJ, and nobody's there. And Izumi goes, actually, you know what? I'm going to go visit home. And they're all like, what? And she goes, so she pulls out her phone, and she goes, hey, Mom, can I come by and visit? And they go, aren't you working? And she goes, yeah, tomorrow, hopefully, I'm coming. And the next day, and the next day, and maybe a week. And she goes, sure. And she asks Pixie Ball, Ragdoll, and Tiger, and they go, definitely. And so Izumi goes, yes. So she walks up to the class and says, okay, tomorrow, and I have a form here, and she pulls out the form saying, tomorrow we are going to the Wild Pussycats rescue agency. And they all look at her going, what? And she goes, I'm going home, and I want to visit my parents and my aunts and whatever you want to call them. But they're adoptive parents, so they're not technically my biological parents. But I want to go visit home, so you're all coming with, and we're going to have some fun there. And they go, okay. And she goes, don't worry. You get one free bag of candy bacon when you get there. And if you do enough work in this week and are good enough, you get another candy bacon bag. And they all look at her and go, oh, candy bacon. And she goes, but the rule is you must respect them, you must not talk back to them, and you must show how good you are as heroes. And they start cheering, being like, yeah, let's do this. And she starts passing out the flyers, and everybody comes back the next day, and they give her the flyers. They're all signed by parents. And she goes, okay, everybody on the bus. And so they get to the cliff in Cannon, and she goes, everybody off the bus. And they get off the bus, and they go, Sensei, is this training? And she goes, definitely. And the doors shut on the bus, and that starts driving away. And Pixie Bob shows up in the car with Mandalay, Tiger, and Ragdoll. They introduce themselves, and they say, where is she? And they go, she's already there. And she pops up behind them, going, what did you say? I'm doing this training with you. And Pixie Bob's like, sweetie, you've already done this training multiple times. And she goes, I don't care. I'll do it again. I like this training. It's fun. And she goes, fine, I'll make them harder on the way there. And she goes, Go, you'll get a 10-minute head start. So they all sit down waiting, and they all just start talking about their quirks and what they're hoping to achieve at this training camp. And all of a sudden, they hear a boom, like something imploded. And Pixie Bob's like, okay, time. And she just taps the ground with a finger, and the entire cliff starts throwing all the children off of it. And she goes, have fun! And they get in the car, and they drive off to the agency, and they're there, and Izumi is there being like, that was a lot of fun. And Tiger's like, you got here before the dang car. She goes, yeah, that was fun still. And Pixie Bob says, did you fight all of them? And she goes, no, I left 2 of them for the students. And Pixie Bob pales at this. He goes, I made those able to kill All Might. And she goes, they're fine. I've trained them to fight All Might before. And they're like, so they're strong enough to kill All Might? She's like, no, they could fight him to a standstill though. So they all work together. They're going to be fine. 5 hours later, Izumi's just sitting out there with a giant box in front of her. And all of a sudden, this man comes running in saying, first one here. And it's Ida. And he has scrapes on his legs. He has bruises all over him. And she goes, first bag. And he goes, yes. And he so far he has the stick out of his ass. So he's not as hell-bent on the rules. So he grabs the bag and runs inside. And he just takes one piece out and starts eating it. And Mandalay sees the bag and she's like, oh, so that's how she got you to train. And he goes, yes, ma'am. Stupid good. And she goes, yeah, she's kind of been making candied bacon ever since I showed her first how to do it. She has the perfect concoction to make candied bacon. And he goes, what do you mean? She goes, I've ordered candied bacon from America. Everywhere around the world, and she has the best out of anybody. And he goes, okay. How does she do it? And Mandalay goes, I don't know. You ask her. She says it's a trade secret. I've even tried to beg her to show me how. And she just goes, nope. And Tiger goes, I know. I ain't telling though. And Mandalay looks at him going, the hell? And he goes, I showed her how to bake a cake, okay? I also showed her how to bake a cake with candied bacon in it. So, she goes, oh, okay. I'm going to need to train extra hard to fight her and beat her so I can get some candied bacon and learn how to make it. He goes, that's all up to you. Just saying, if you fight her, don't fight her in agility and strength. And she goes, why? Because she's stronger and faster than me. And Mandalay goes, oh yeah. She did train with us for 20 years. And Ida overhearing this is like, wait, what? And they go, yeah, she has a very strong cat kind of quirk. And this cat quirk is a panther quirk. And she's known as the number 10 hero, Black Panther. And she walks in saying, the rest of the class is here and they're currently dying outside. And Pixie Bob's like, makes sense, because he kind of did give them the incentive to get here as fast as possible. And she goes, yeah, I kind of did, but I also didn't really give them that much of an incentive. And Mandalay goes, yeah, you did. You have the best candied bacon in the entire world. Just, no. This is my bad batches. I don't let anybody touch my good batches. And Mandalay looks at her and going, this bag right here, this gallon-sized bag, is the bad batches. And she goes, yeah, maybe 1 out of 5 batches is the good one. And Mandalay's like, how much candied bacon do you go through? And she goes, And she just shrugs. And everybody finally walks in with their own bags, and they're like, we don't care if this is a bad batch. This is still the best friggin' thing ever. And they walk up to the dinner table and they take a piece of candy bacon and they eat it. And then they package away the bag because they want to savor it. And she goes, good thinking. And she pulls out her bag, the one that she eats. And they see 3 pieces of candied bacon in it. And they go, why is there only 3? And she goes, this is how much I make a batch. I just made this when we left. And they look at her and going, so you make 3 pieces every batch? And she goes, yeah. If I make any more, I lose the flavor and the ability to make the good ones. And they look at her and go, so what classifies as a bad batch? And she goes, I need to hurry and make more for you guys. Or, I need to make it for the entire school. And they look at her and going, you do what? And she goes, yeah, I kind of make it for the entire school. The cafeteria has a gift shop where you can buy little snacks. You can buy Madeleines from America. You can buy other stuff from other places. And you can buy biscuits from the southwest of America. And she goes, those biscuits are good. And then she goes, I also put bad batches in the gift shop saying that this is a bad batch. I'm just giving it away for free. And they put it in the free box. And it's gone immediately. And it's normally dried. It's normally a shrink wrapped piece of bacon that has nothing else on it besides candy. So they go through their training camp. Nothing happens particularly, but she goes through the ball test and all the rest of the tests and says, okay, so the highest score gets a good batch and only a portion of a good batch. The second highest score gets a full bag of bad batch. And the highest score is Bakugo at this one. He says, can I get a full bag of bad batch? She goes, sure, but why not good batch? And he goes, I don't care if it's the good batch or the bad batch. I just want a full bag. She goes, okay, I understand. So she brings out 2 bags of the bad batch. And she goes, first place gets this. Second place gets this. And hands Todoroki the one bag of bad batch. And Momo Yaoyorozu, who is able to use her quirk more efficiently without as much fat lipids used, and she just hands her 1 bag of candy bacon and says, you're the 3rd place, and this is a half full bag, so make it last. And everybody else in the roster, she goes, okay, I love you guys like children. I honestly do. Well, except you, Mineta. But you guys need to work just a tiny bit harder. So she makes everybody, except Mineta, go 1 more round through the ringer, and she makes Mineta go through 2, because he still hasn't gotten out of his perverted ways. And Pixie Bob and Mandalay see that she's making them go through the training that she went through, and they walk out and say, what are you doing? And she goes, I'm training them like you trained me, just a little harder. And they go, that's meant for a child. You know that, right? And she goes, yeah, I do. And they all look at her and go, she did this when she was a child. And Mandalay, Pixie Bob, and Ragdoll all shake their head in unison, saying, yeah. Tiger goes through 50 times harder training than this. She goes, yeah, I kind of do 100 times harder training than this when I'm on free time. But in their eyes, I only do 2 times harder. And they go, oh, makes sense. And she whispered this next to Mandalay, and she goes, makes sense. So, can we get a bag of candy bacon? And Mandalay, Ragdoll, and Pixie Bob are all having the puppy dog eyes, being like, please, please, please. And she goes, no. And she runs in and gets a bag and runs out and says, is he still going to that spot? And they go, yeah, he is. And she goes, I'll be back. And she says, watch them. If they go running off and do some crazy stuff, take the rewards away. But if they don't, you can give them 1 piece of bad batch. And they go, yes, ma'am. And they walk in, they grab a tray of bad batch, and They just let it sit out in the sun to dry off a little because the grease is still overpowering of the candy at first. So she runs up to the spot where Coda is, and she walks up to Coda and says, "Hey, little bro, I brought you some." And he looks over and sees Izumi. He runs up and hugs her and says, "Izumi!" And she goes, "Hi, I brought you a bag of candied bacon." And his eyes just close and say, "Seriously, Izumi? I don't want candied bacon." And she goes, "But come on, it's good." And he goes, "No, it's not. It's bad for you." And she goes, "You big meanie." And he goes, "If you don't want me to be a meanie, then don't make this." And she goes, "Sorry, but I can't stop making it." And he goes, "And I won't eat it because it's bad for you." And she goes, "Just try one bite. That's all I ask." And he goes, "No." And she's at this point on her knees begging. And one of them, the lowest person in class, wants to see what's going on because he is a pervert and he wants to see her more, especially when she's in her hero costume because he's seen her and she thinks that it's very skimpy and looks good on her. So he followed her, and Ragdoll sensed this and like, we're gonna let her deal with him. And she's just on her knees saying, "Please, just try one. Please, please." And Mineta takes out his phone and clicks the picture, and he forgot the sound was on. And she heard it. And all of a sudden the wind changed, and she was downwind from him. And he didn't know this, but she could smell him and was like, I'll go make him do a few more ringers. In her mind, and she just keeps begging, "Please, one time. I'm not going to make it anymore if you just try it." And he goes, "Okay." And he tries one piece of bacon. He's like, "Oh, this is good." And she goes, "I know, right?" And he goes, "Now don't make any more." And she goes, "Okay, I did make a promise." And she said, "I didn't say where I wouldn't make it." And he goes, "I know, you're just going to make it for your class now." And she goes, "Yeah, I'm going to make it for my class, and I'm going to make it for you." And she starts messing with his hair, and he's like, "Stop." She says, "No. It's too fun to mess with you." He goes, "Stop." He starts hitting her hand away, and she doesn't flinch at this, and he finally squirts her with water, and she jumps away and hisses at him slightly. And he goes, "Makes sense. You're a cat." And she goes, "No, I'm a panther." He sprays her with water going, "Bad cat." And she hisses at him going, "Stop." And Mineta's recording this entire thing at this point. And she's like, "Okay, now that's over. I gotta go deal with somebody." And Koda's like, "Who?" She's like, "Give me a minute." And she falls through the ground. And Koda's like, "Oh, so she needs to sneak up on him." And all of a sudden he hears, "Hey, put me down, hey." And she just walks out of the bushes and goes, "So, the little pervert thinks that he can get some blackmail on me." And she has his phone in her right hand and him in her left. And she's holding him by his collar. And he's like, "Hey, Koda, want some target practice?" And he goes, "Yeah." And she holds him out and says, "Here you go." And Koda uses his quirk at full blast, which is not very strong right this second. It ramps up over time, and he starts spraying Mineta constantly with his quirk. Maybe 10 minutes later, Mineta is finally stopped being sprayed by Koda, and he goes, "I'm tired. Can you take me home, big sis?" And she goes, "Sure." She grabs Koda really close, hugs him, and she falls to the ground and appears right behind Mandalay and says, "Here's Koda." And she takes him, and she goes, "I promised that I wouldn't make it here anymore." And they go, "So he ate some?" And she goes, "Yeah. The only one who gets it now is him." And Tiger Pixie Bob, and Mandalay are all basically anime crying at this point, like, come on, please make us up. And Tiger, and she walks to Tiger and says, I promised I wouldn't make it here. The job relies on you now. Remember, don't you dare spill my secrets. And he goes, yes, ma'am. And he straightens up going, I will take on this duty as a man of honor. And she starts laughing a little, going, okay, well, time for me to head out. And she gets on the bus, and all the students get on the bus. They start talking. They go back to school a week later. They get home, and their parents are like, how was the trip? And Uraraka gets home, and she has a package at her front door. And it's strange because no one knows her address except the teachers at UA and her parents. So she opens the package, and it's 2 ring fingers with a note that says, bring All Might to this location or your parents die. And she starts freaking out, and she reads the rest of the note saying, if you contact any heroes at all, they immediately get it. So she calls up All Might and starts talking with him and says, how's Izumi? And he knows that they never talk to him about Izumi unless they're in trouble. And he goes, she's good. She just got home. And they're listening in on her conversation. So she goes, All Might, can you meet me at whatever address it is? And he goes, sure, what is it? And she goes, can you just meet me there? I have something to ask you. And he goes, okay, I'll meet you there. And him knowing the code, which is, if they ask him about Izumi, they're in trouble. Because Izumi and All Might don't get along very well. He immediately pulls out his phone and calls up Izumi. And Izumi, knowing that All Might never calls her, she answers saying, did they use the code? And he goes, definitely. This location in 5 minutes. And she goes, I'm already there. And he goes, of course you are. So I'm going to be there in 2, and I'll see you. And so he gets across the street in his normal casual clothes, and he sits at a table and out in the open, and Uraraka walks up and says, hi, All Might, I got a package. And she pushes the package towards him, and he opens the package and sees the note, and then he looks into the package and he sees 2 fingers, and he closes the package and says, okay, I understand the situation. I'm very sorry, and this may not work out well. And he walks into the building right across the street, and Izumi's already in the building, just hiding her presence in the shadow, just watching and waiting. And All for One walks out of the shadows being like, so, you're finally here. And All Might is in skinny form. He tries to buff up, but he can't because he can't activate his quirk because someone's canceling it. And Izumi sees exactly who's canceling, and it's someone in the back with its brain exposed. And she's like, his eyes are glowing red. What? Why? And All Might starts talking with this masked man, and he goes, okay, what do you want? And he says, I want you dead. And he goes, okay, you can try. And he tries to buff up again, and nothing happens. And Izumi, who's in the shadows at this moment, moves up behind this figure and knocks him out easily by dragging him into the shadows, so he gets suffocated and falls asleep. And all of a sudden, All Might buffs up and says, now you can try to stop me. And he starts fighting All for One, and Izumi comes out of the shadow and says, you guys really need to learn what our classroom is about. All for One sees the number 10 hero, the Black Panther, and says, oh crap. And all of a sudden, his throat gets slit. She goes, yeah, I know exactly who you are. I don't want you touching any of my students anymore. So you can go screw off. And he goes, yeah. I'm going to give you something that it's going to make you change drastically. And he grabs her by the face and gives her all of his quirks, including one that programs her to do villainy. And she passes out and all for one dies on the floor. And so they take her to Recovery Girl, and she gets healed by Recovery Girl, and she's still asleep. At this point, the only person who knows her life outside of the classroom is Aizawa. And he only knows that she's dating someone, and that this someone is another pro hero, and that normally they are sworn enemies. And so he calls up this pro hero and says, I know you're dating Izumi Midoriya, and I need your help. And she goes, what is it? And he goes, she has been rendered unconscious from the number one villain, and we need your help waking her up. And at this point, Rumi is a number 7 hero, the rabbit hero, Mirko, runs into the UA and says, where is she? And Aizawa, who was waiting for her, says she's in Recovery Girl's office and she's currently asleep. And Mirko just sits by the bedside and waits for her to wake up. And 3 months later, past the sports festival, and it's a month before the teachers versus students. Izumi finally wakes up, and she sees Mirko, and she starts getting a headache. Not just any kind of headache, it feels like a stabbing pain in her head. And she starts wincing at this, and she passes out again, and she's in her mindscape. She sees 3 figures. No, there's 3 figures in this mindscape. Her, what looks like a dark blue furred panther, what you see in the picture, and this man with a mask. And this man with a mask has a slit across his neck saying, so, you're my successor, huh? Well, I'm gonna drive you crazy and make you do what I want. And she goes, hell no. And she looks at the panther and sees the panther is just laying there asleep. And she walks up to the panther and says, hi, old friend. I haven't seen you in a long time. And it wakes up and says, you have no right to call me old friend. You forgot about me. She goes, yeah, I'm sorry. And he goes, I can hold him off for a little bit, but you have to reclaim me. And she goes, how can I do that? Go home again. And at this point, the League of Villains are trying to get back together, so they are not going to attack the training camp. And the Wild Pussycats are already set up to take the kids for the training camp, so they go through the teachers versus students, and Mirko is watching over them with Izumi currently on bed rest, and she says that the only thing that she can do is go home and stay home for a little bit. So she goes home to Wild Pussycats, and Wild Pussycats see her and they greet her, and she goes, I'm sorry, but I can't stay here. I have to go into the forest. So 2 years later, this giant panther's myth is a legend within the forest. And Wild Pussycats say that anybody that sees a giant panther is supposed to run the other direction. And they all agree, being like, yeah, a quirked animal is very bad. So 2 years have passed since she's been fighting this internal battle, and Rumi, or Mirko, has been getting worried, and she's gone to the Wild Pussycats to see if she's there, and Wild Pussycats say that she hasn't come out yet. And Rumi is starting to get worried, and so Mirko is just doing hero work and hears about this attack of a giant black panther on this random abandoned bar. And she goes, "What?" So she takes off immediately, running after where this story is, and she gets to this location and finds that this giant panther is fighting villains. And it's mindlessly tearing them to shreds. And she just sits back and watches, and Aizawa shows up without a quirk. Or no, with a quirk. Because when the Nomu died, his quirk got transferred back somehow. I don't really know how it would work. But he has his quirk, and he goes, why are you just sitting back? And she goes, I have to wait. I have to see if that's actually her or somebody else. And he hears Mirko saying this, and he goes, oh, okay, I'll make sure no hero gets involved. And he starts going around telling all the heroes to stay away from the Black Panther. We got one of the top 10 heroes to get to fight it. And all these D-list sidekicks are like, okay, we understand. So 10 minutes later, all the villains are now either unconscious or dead, and she's roaring in the middle of the crowd. And none of the villains have quirks. None of them have quirks anymore. One scratch or bite from Izumi, and they lose their quirk. So Mirko hops down from the roof, and she just walks towards Izumi and says, "Hey, babe, I missed you." And Izumi flips towards her, and she starts growling, and Mirko just continues when her animal instincts are saying, "Run the other direction. That's not her." And Izumi starts to calm down and center herself in the mindscape. Izumi is hearing this and is getting energized, and she starts fighting harder and harder. And the panther says, I've done everything I can, and there's someone who wants to talk to you, and I can't fight him. You have to finish him off now. And she goes, I know. So time starts to slow down in the real world, and she still hears Mirko's voice, but it's every few seconds that she hears a word from Mirko. And she's fighting for her life at this point. She's missing an arm in her mindscape. All she has is claws, and she's in panther form because she reconnected with her panther side, and so she's in panther form, and she has the strength of a panther. She has the agility of a panther. And All For One is missing an arm, missing a leg, missing his head, but he's just still standing there laughing his ass off, being like, you can't kill me. And finally, Izumi gets close enough to plunge her hand through his chest. And he's like, how? But how? And the One For All in their minds. Yeah, this is in the John one. But the One For All in her mind finally disappears because he was too cocky and thought that he was immortal. And her eyes go from a deep shade of purple to a deep shade of blue, and they soften up, and she sits down and she starts licking her paws. And Rumi sees this and is like, Izumi, is that you? And she just transforms, and she continues to lick her hand, and she goes, I'm hungry. You got some candy bacon? And Rumi hears this and goes, Izumi! And she runs up and hugs her and says, you're finally back. And she goes, when did I leave? And she goes, true. Technically never left. So, I have a question. She goes, yes? Do you remember everything I said? And she goes, yes. And the answer is yes. And Rumi, or Mirko, starts to cry, and she goes, yes! I thought you'd reject. And she goes, we were together for, how many years? Since the first year of UA, if I remember correctly. And she goes, yeah. Since we were 16, we've been going out. We're basically married already. And Rumi starts to blush at this, going, yeah, I think your students need you. And she goes, I know. So she goes back to her students, and she enters the classroom, and she's more panther than girl at this point. So she has longer hair, a longer tail. Her ears are a little bit bigger, and she's a lot more furry in this one now. And they see her, and they're like, who are you? And she goes, rude? You missed my candy bacon for 2 years and you forget me? And all their eyes widen, going, Izumi! And she goes, yeah, it's me. And her brother, who's in the class, like, still, goes, I have a question for you, Teach. And she goes, what is it? And he goes, what's your last name? And she goes, legally, I don't like it. Well, actually, legally, it's going to be whatever Mirko's last name is. So, yeah. So she just says Mirko's last name, and they go, oh, you mean the rabbit hero Mirko is your wife? And she goes, definitely. I go, congratulations. She goes, yeah. Hasn't happened yet, so my legal name isn't that yet. My legal name is my maiden name. I freaking hate it. And he goes, what is your maiden name? And she goes, I'm not going to tell you. I don't need to tell you. I prefer it if you don't know, and I would keep that section of my life a secret. And he goes, I understand. And he goes back to his seat. And at this point, the name Black Panther and her name Izumi has gotten around, and Izuku Midoriya's parents has seen this and is like, damn, that brat is so powerful. And so I'm going to end it here. So if you guys could, go to Shota Aizawa. I'm probably going to put a link in the description. Maybe, maybe not. It might not be there for a few days, though, from when this is published or posted. So if you guys could go to Shota Aizawa and spam him in the chat, spam him in his comments saying, make another part of What If Deku was a Black Panther, or had a Black Panther quirk, because that series was freaking good. And if you guys could go to Void Spawn What Ifs and give him some ideas for his experiment Deku, that would be great, because he still has to finish that series, and I might make one of them. So, if you guys want me to make an experiment Deku, please tell me in the comments. I might make a experiment Ghost Rider Deku, maybe. I don't know. So, you guys tell me, and I'll do it. So, talk to you guys later. Bye!